let's talk to Dominic.
Yes.
Or Dominic.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Dominic.
Hey
Hi,
there.
Dominic.
Yeah, you are live on Chewed Gum.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I think there's so many thoughts racing right now, but yeah, I just kind of wanted to go into like the why we should believe, and I believe a huge portion of that comes from the moral, like the moral, the ethics, the objectivity of it, and just through my own like research on it, I haven't found any like secular framework that is able to like objectively derive like intrinsic human value the same way that a theistic conception of God can. And I do believe in a Christian God.
Okay, so real quick, let's point something out. In every scenario that you just like, whether it's you being a Christian saying that you adhere to what God says, or it's me just being a human saying that I adhere to X, Y, and Z, and here's my moral what's the word I'm looking for? Foundation. Both of us are just humans that are subjectively asserting what our objective when it comes to morality is. So it's like you're telling us, oh, I think God says this, this, and this, and therefore that's my objective. And I'm saying, I think this, this, and this is a value, and therefore that's my objective for morality. So both of those are subjective things. Unless you have evidence of this God and exactly what he thinks is moral and isn't moral, which maybe you do, and we'd be happy to hear it.
Yeah, so I definitely don't have any like empirical, like 100% evidence. I just don't think that's a possibility. I do like to usually think of like the best course of action, if that makes any sense. And so when I'm looking at this, I guess, because the problem that I see is the like deriving the ought from is, I believe, is a huge thing within these frameworks. And so when I'm looking at like the nature of God, I think, so axiological, so that's like the study of value, ontology, which is being, and epistemics, which is like knowledge. I think they all have to converge. They're interdependent upon each other. And so
Dominic, instead of us going through like a mini philosophy class, I'm really way more interested in what your evidence for, like, let's start here. Do you want to believe something that is true or something that isn't true?
True.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. How did you determine that the existence of a God is true?
Okay. In theoretical physics, I would
No. Just in human, like just normal, average people having a conversation. Like, what is your reason, Dominic's reason, for believing that a God exists and that is a true thing?
Yeah. So there is different things that are pointing to like an atemporal reality, and the implications of that lead me to progressively believe into a conception of God. Now, on top of that, you would have to derive other things such as consciousness and personhood from that. But that is like, it's an extremely long line of abductive reasoning that brought me to that conclusion. But the first step of that was the atemporal aspect of it, which can be seen from different physics models.
Like what?
So CFT ADS correspondence is one model where it's also called the holographic principle.
Dominic,
where
let's just like dumb it down. Explain it to us like we're 5. Explain it to us like we're 15-year-olds that are going to hell if you don't convince us that this God exists.
Okay. So there's a few things that have like predictive value, and within the equations and within the models, time is not fundamental, which means that at the fundamental reality of the universe, time becomes emergent. And then so the implications that I'm using
what does time becomes emergent mean, Dominic? I'm asking genuinely because I don't know what that means.
So it's like the relationships between things. Like there's a bunch of different views with it, and there's critiques for every view. But what, like the view that I've led down is the one that leads me to a conception of God, if that makes sense. So it being emergent would be the like quickest definition, would be like the change between relations between entities that measure. It's an abstract concept that is like realized.
But Dominic, you started your entire argument with this idea that God is outside of time and space and all of that, and you just asserted something. So I'm like trying to help you out here, saying like, okay, pretend we're 15-year-olds that you need to convince that a God is real. What is your evidence of that God? Because we can't start with a presupposition. I mean, you can if you want, and then the phone call is going to be over really soon because that's not an argument. But you're starting with this assertion, and I'm trying to figure out how you got there.
Yeah. So, like I said, there isn't 100% like empirical evidence of it. I don't believe there
no
is,
evidence,
but I think
there's no evidence. That's what we're asking for, is any evidence. So what if you have any evidence for that? I would love to hear it.
I guess what would be your definition of evidence for this if it's not like the best like one of
just
like
evidence.
a logical conclusion from it.
Indisputable proof that can be replicated over and over again.
Because here's the problem. The things that you've pointed at, like everything can be explained naturalistically. And so I don't understand why we're now putting this whole, well, no, there's this atemporal. How did you reach that conclusion?
So the naturalistic thing, again, I don't think that morality can be grounded within a naturalistic framework.
It is. Here I am living it out. Because can you prove to me that there is an objective moral source? Because what you're doing here is just circular logic. You're saying, well, there is a God because we needed to prove morality, and morality needs a God, and so we're just going around in a circle. But I'm telling you, I can sit here without any gods and say, okay, I am going to pick the objective for my morality, for my moral framework, which is going to be a mixture of well-being and consent and reducing harm, and deciding that I think, humans matter and should continue on, which makes sense, like evolutionarily, that I would want that to be a thing. And then, bam, I've got a moral framework and I work from it. What you're offering up is the Christian God, which all you have so far to know what the Christian God thinks or says about anything would be the Bible, which is a terrible source for morality. We could be owning other humans as slaves if we were following that, and yet it would take the time to tell us not to eat shrimp. It would be telling us to hate our family and choose religion instead. And it would be telling us that you can take young girls as your sex slaves when you conquer a country, which is also fine because genocide is totally fine according to this God. So I'm deeply confused why you need this whole presupposition of an atemporal blah, 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 when we can explain all of this without any of that nonsensical presupposition, not great morals,
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Is it okay if I touch upon them kind of in sequence?
Yeah, that was a lot, for sure.
For the first part, when just talking about your morality, I do I completely agree. Like well-being, flourishing, all these things are extremely important. But in terms of like truth tracking value, when we derive it from an evolutionary stance, that means the morality isn't immutable. So like
I don't think that it is. I don't think that there is such thing as objective morality. That's what I started with. Your morality is just as subjective as mine. I just think mine is better than yours.
I would also think that I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that we can come to an objective morality through subjectivity, but the way we do that would be differently. So I do agree with the stance on like the Bible, for example, how it's written. It does have things I disagree with, and I think the progression of that is the more so the awareness of the nature of God, and so like humanity, it's trending towards a clearer picture of that instead of deriving our morality
How did
from
you
the awareness
determine?
itself.
How did you determine what a God thinks is moral and not?
From the implications of what it would mean if he was a perfect being. So the
How do
different
you, Dominic, how do you know what a
yeah.
perfect being is? You're just a human. How can you determine what is moral and what isn't? Are you saying that humans can do that?
Yes, I do
Great.
think that we can
I agree.
determine
That's
what is
what humans
moral.
do. Because we decide what is moral or not. We make those decisions, we reach those conclusions, and they can be different across different cultures. And I'm sure that you think some things are moral that I think are horrifically immoral, and vice versa, because that's what humans do. And I know for a fact that there are Christians that I know that would think that what you think is moral is immoral, and vice versa, even though you claim to both be believing in the same objective source for morality. So I'm asking you, how do we determine what the objective moral standing is that this God holds? How do you figure that out?
Well, that's why I agree with you on that part. I think the grounding of it, so where it's like derived from. So, like, say something happened within an evolutionary stance where certain things we believe are moral now aren't moral in the future, or vice versa. I don't think, like, at any point in time, no matter the circumstances, like killing an innocent person is okay. Like, even if evolution would prefer that in a sense. And so when I'm thinking
I
about,
don't use
again, no,
evolution to determine my morals either, Dominic. I'm asking, how do you figure out what an innocent person is? Because
an
in the
innocent person,
Bible, God has rape victims marrying their rapists. So, like, how do we determine who's innocent or not?
innocence, definitely. That is a good question. So for innocence, I definitely would look, you would have to look, I guess, what we're prefacing with like the ground of value itself, which I believe, so there's a term called agape, which would be the self, so
I'm
like
aware.
okay.
But
And so
but that's this is all subjective from you. So I'm asking, where do we get to the part where I should believe you instead of what I believe? Why should I be convinced that you have some truth that I don't have? Because you said at the beginning that you want to believe things that are true. Same. Me too. I want to believe things that are true. I don't want to believe things that aren't true. So I'm asking, how do we get to the point where I know that what you're saying is true and not just these ideas that, you think are cool or whatever? Because I can easily fathom how we have morality without a God, because I think it's happening. But it's also subjective because it's what we've decided, and that's why it looks so different over time and across cultures, and even from person to person, because it is very subjective. And there's no God that's written this in our hearts and everything, or else you would see some consistency. You would at minimum see some consistency, you would think, in the book that he supposedly left behind. So, sorry, that was a lot again. I'll get back to the main question, which is, how do we determine that the source you're claiming gives us morality exists?
I think that when we test it to anything else wouldn't sustain itself over time. And just so we go back to that like Bible thing on like one's view of scripture, again, like I don't believe that it's 100% perfect because the people that wrote it have a limited awareness of that nature of God, if that makes sense. And so what's written within the pages is kind of like it's trending along with humanity as we reach this, as we further refine our own perceptions of God. And so that's why I'm talking about the immutable aspect of morality. I do believe there are immutable things that will never change no matter what, which isn't based off of subjectivity.
I understand, like, you've laid out what you think about all these things. I still don't hear the part where, like, Why should I believe that those assertions that you're making over and over and over again are true or part of reality?
That's the part where I'm saying that nothing else can sustain, like through existence, like through reality. So there's different principles
Nothing
and
else can
different
sustain
values
what?
that can change, like ethics, like value itself. And so there can be subjective like fluctuations between cultures and between different things. And so what we see sustaining throughout, like at the basis, like every single point in time, most people would agree, like killing, of course, is bad. And so these things that are
Except most people wouldn't.
preserved.
Like we see people now not agreeing with that, and we've seen that clearly in the past. But even if there was, let's pretend there was one thing that all of society, all of humanity has always agreed on as far as morals go. Let's say that we always had this idea that children should be protected, which we haven't. Let's be clear. We see that happening now all the time where they're not being protected. But let's pretend that humanity has
I
always
agree.
held that value. Yeah, let's pretend that we have. That would be a cool world, first of all. But even if that were true, can you tell me how that gets us to a God? How does that mean a God exists? Why can't that mean we just have always had this shared value? Where's the part that we get to a God? Why wouldn't it just be an unexplained shared value?
So for like my conception of God, there's like being among beings and then being itself. And so I think that principle within that, like if we're taking that principle from morality, we can attribute that as like an analogous to God's, like as a piece of God's nature, if that makes sense. The difference now deriving it.
I understand
like, again,
how you're explaining it that way, but we're not ever getting, like, it's kind of just going in a circle over and over again, because we're never getting to the. Yeah, please, Alyssa.
It feels a little word salady, Dominic. It feels a little like I want you to explain your answers to these questions without feeling like you need to use really high level language, because I feel like the language is creating it's creating this weird boundary between the message you're trying to explain and like kind of we're getting lost in the weeds. We're getting lost in the sauce of it. And I want you to just speak clearly as Dom. And like, it sounds a lot like Jordan Peterson regurgitated. And I think that you, Dominic, have ideas of your own that you can bring to the table, even if you do identify with the things that he shares. I'm sure that you have reasoning that doesn't require the philosophical word salad on top of all of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand. Like again, I guess I was just going off like the title question. I said from the very beginning, there's no like evidence for it. I'm just using the best reasoning and like the purpose of it.
But do you think that people should believe things without good reasons?
I don't see how having like an objective morality that ensures like
But you don't
intrinsic
have
value.
You have a subjective morality like I do. We have objectives with our morality. We both do, I would think. But we reach those through different methods. You think that you somehow know what the God of the universe thinks is moral. And I don't think that a God exists. So I have chosen what I think are good frameworks for morality. And we're both being very subjective with that. And therefore, we have objective morality because we've subjectively picked objectives. But I still, everything you've offered so far is just a presupposition that there is a God. What would it take, Dominic, for you to not believe that there's a God? What would make you stop believing that a God exists?
I believe in. I mean, I guess if I'm dead and there's no afterlife.
There's nothing here or now?
Honestly, I don't think so, just because with the way I want, when I do like have a family or raise them, and the values I want to instill with them and where I'm deriving those values from, it does come from an immutable God. And I don't see myself being able to like teach or put those values within.
So you need for
Because
there to be a God to exist, because that's where you think that you're getting your values from, and you're afraid of what to do without that framework. That's what it sounds like you're saying, because I thought you cared about what is true or not. Because what if there is no God? And that sucks. There's nothing when we die. We have to figure out our own morality. We can't outsource our responsibility to some other being. We have to do the work ourselves, and we have to, parent well and be, humans that do decent things on our own without the motivation from a God or an afterlife. Like, what if that's actually what's true? Do you care more about comfort, which would be like, no, I can just outsource all of this to this other being? Or do you care about finding out what's true so that you can operate within reality and live the best life that you can based off of that, and have a family and teach them what you believe are good values, which apparently you're going to do either way? But wouldn't you rather them be in line with reality, observable reality, that we can, communicate easily to each other, that we have evidence for, that we have good reason to believe? Because did you grow up Christian?
So my parents are Christian. I never, not like huge church going, but I did. I would say it's more so come within the past few years of looking at different religions and different, just different things.
Yeah. I think that it would be really sad for you to not explore this a bit more and ask more questions, because this is a presupposition argument. This is you almost admitting that you need there to be a God. You need that to be part of your framework for how you view the world. And there are so many other ways to get that framework while also not making yourself believe stuff that possibly just is untrue. I think if you spend a bit more time looking into secular morality, have you ever read The Moral Landscape by Sam Harris?
Is that the consequentialism?
No, not really.
What it uses, or
no, there's a lot more to it. I mean, that's the other thing about morality, as you and I have both, I think, agreed. Like, it does get really subjective, and so that's why there's so many different perspectives you can read about morality. But I think that would be a good one for you to read. Sapiens is a really interesting book. Do you like to read?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you should use that to your benefit and read all the things. What's the worst thing that happens? You still believe what you believe now? Okay, cool. But I would encourage you to go ask more questions about all of this. And are you into ChatGPT at all?
Occasionally.
Okay, I do this to practice for other topics, but go in there and debate ChatGPT. I think that's actually a fun exercise as well. And so you can even take some of the things you learn and like go in there and debate those things, or ask ChatGPT to play the other side and you try to play, devil's advocate and all that. But I think there's more here, that if you can let yourself actually get outside of this idea that there must be a God, I think you're actually going to find even more answers than what you think you're finding within this framework of there is a God and it's the Christian God.
Got you. If I could say one thing real quick,
Sure.
just for the like personal reasons, I only just like gave the morality as one aspect of it. Like, there's a bunch of different reasons for why I do believe, so it's not like limited to that. And the only other thing, like, again, I don't think there is any like empirical evidence for it or proof in general. But if we were to go into like the like applicable benefits of it or the pragmatic benefits of it, I do believe that that is in alignment with reality and with truth, and it doesn't cause harm. And one other thing I was going to say is I've watched like one episode from. Can I say this really quickly?
Sure.
Or did you have something?
It's
like I've seen one other episode, and I think you were like, if something can, for like the scripture, if something be used as good and bad, it shouldn't be like used at all. But I see it more as like a scalpel, where if you give it to someone who is bad, they can do a bunch of damage with it. But if you give it to a surgeon, it can end up saving like lives. And so that's just my view on it. And I think there are a lot of reasons that it can help somebody out.
I understand, but that was specifically in the context of it being listed as a good reason to believe in it. Something being beneficial alone is not a good reason to believe that it's true. I can believe that I'm gonna make $1 million in super chats tonight, and that would be beneficial to believe because it would make me really happy, and it would make me do the best job that I've ever done on chewed gum. But then is it beneficial when we get to the end of the show and I don't actually make $1 million? And now all the online shopping I just did while I was sitting here is racked up on my credit card, like that's not helpful. So something being beneficial alone is not a good reason to believe it's true. Because otherwise I could tell you about my favorite God, which is this glittery pink unicorn. She's invisible, undetectable, but she's real and she's here. And I've had personal experiences, and she wants you to be your best self ever. And anytime you're feeling good, anytime you're doing good things, that's actually her influence on your life, whether you know it or not. I could sit here and tell you about this God, the pink unicorn, and how beneficial it is. And you'd probably agree, yeah, that does sound beneficial, but does that make it true?
So I understand where you're coming from with that thing. I feel like, say, if you were to say, like, you have a unicorn concept, there would have to be some type of like not deduction, but reason for you to have like a unicorn form. And so I
do. Unicorns are depicted throughout history. I mean, if you look at the cave drawings, you can basically see them in there. So they've been really important because I think a lot of people have had personal experiences with the unicorn god.
Touché.
That's what I'm saying, Dominic. I think that there are some things here that I think you're very smart. I love that you love to read. I think you should take advantage of that because I think that I could have just as many, quote, good reasons for believing in my unicorn god, and better, because my unicorn god wrote a perfect Bible that doesn't say love your neighbor as yourself. It says love your neighbor the way they want to be loved. And it also doesn't have owning people as slaves. It also doesn't have rape. It also doesn't have all kinds of other things in it that I think are harmful. And then I have just as many good reasons to believe in that God as you do yours. And I think that you are smarter than that. And so I'm just saying, go read more, go look into this more. The worst thing that happens is you call us back and you have better reasons for believing and you can share them with us. And that's cool. And another thing that could happen is you think, you know what, wait, maybe I don't know about some of these things and I'm going to hold off on forming an opinion until I have better reason.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Anything else before we let you go?
That's all I wanted to talk about for that. And yeah, unless we're talking about like actual relationships or like personal like lives with it, I don't have anything I don't have anything more to add to like the existence aspect of it. But I do think there's a lot to like talk about in like day-to-day life if you guys ever talk about that.
Yeah, call us back sometime, and we'd love that. Alyssa, did you have any questions? Sorry, I like totally took over that conversation. But.
No, it's totally fine. No, I'm good.
Cool. Well, yeah, Dominic, call back sometime. I think that you and Alyssa and whoever is co-hosting with her could have, because I'm about to be gone for a bit, but I think you guys could have some really interesting conversations about the day-to-day life stuff and your reasons for how that's been beneficial for you. And maybe Alyssa might have some perspectives on why she doesn't need those things, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Cool. Well, thanks for calling, Dominic. Have a great evening.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ooh. I give you credit for sticking with that, because I feel like my eyes glazed over like 3 minutes in, and I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. And I knew that I had a feeling that that's what that call was going to be like.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate the use of vocabulary. I appreciate what's happening there, but I think Dominic has a bit further to go. And I also think that when you really understand something and have a grasp on the truth of it, that you can explain it in relatively simple terms, or at least help somebody get to some point. And I think Dominic is still struggling even with that part of explaining like why he thinks these presuppositions, which already are not arguments, are what he considers to be true, you know? So there's more to discover there, but I did appreciate his honesty. And I actually feel like he was being very honest in that conversation.
Yeah, I agree. So. And part of the reason why I was asking him to, I was trying to, I feel the same way that you do, where if you really believe these things and it's like, it's something that you fully understand, then you can explain it in a really like simple way and still get the point across. And so I think you're right. I think there's just more that he gets to dig into with what the belief is there, so that he has a thorough understanding and he can explain it in ways that are beyond maybe like how it's been presented to him thus far.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think there's a tendency, sorry, I'm trying to plug my iPad in. There's a tendency in these calls, and I understand, especially like if you're calling Forrest or Matt or somebody, there's a tendency to be like, I have to just be right and say the thing and stick to my script and be right about this and present it perfectly. And I think, not that Matt and Forrest don't also, I know, care about this as well. We just want an honest conversation where somebody's answering truthfully. And I want to know that your value is believing stuff that is true, not just what you can present in a package. You know, I want to know, like, is this really something you believe, and why do you really believe it? It sounds like to me, there's probably some more personal reasons behind Dominic's belief, which to me is always way more compelling reason for that person to believe. It's not a compelling reason for me to believe. But don't you feel like if somebody tells you, well, don't you understand people more when they believe because of a personal experience than like, well, this, and this argument or presupposition, it's 100%. Not convincing to me, but I get like why they are.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's when people have personal, especially when they call in here and they have a personal experience that they feel very close to. I don't really have an interest in dismantling that for them unless they're really trying to like challenge us, because it just, I don't know, like if that is what works for you, then that's what works for you, and like it just doesn't, I don't know. I have no interest in wanting to debate someone's personal experience, because we would end up doing that all day and getting nowhere. Right. And like for some people, it's very powerful and it does something for them. So I don't know, whatever. So I agree. Personal experience is at least something where then it at least feels honest. At least you're being honest, and it's coming from your own perspective, your own life. And I don't know. Yeah. Look forward to him calling back with more.
Yeah, he was very respectful, and overall, I appreciate conversations like that. So I have announcements real quick. Do you want to be picking our next caller while I share those? Tomorrow, we have The Hang Up with Matt Delahunty and a special episode with Daryl Ray from Recovering from Religion. That's going to be great. I wish that I could be watching that, but I'll be getting ready for all my travels. And then Thursday, we have Takis with Josie and Luxander. Then Friday and Saturday, all day, we are fundraising. And those are going to be really fun episodes. Like Alyssa said, on Friday, she's hosting with a sex educator. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah. I'm waiting for her to confirm, but it'll be a sex educator.
Okay, cool. And I'm actually hosting that day as well. I have a very special guest that I'm also waiting on confirmation from. If not, it'll still be somebody cool. But I'm hoping that he can do it. So we'll see. And that's starting at noon on Friday. So all day Friday, starting at noon, we're going to have calls. And those will be where you can call in and ask questions. And I don't think we're prioritizing theists for those. Those will just be like Q&A, like where you guys get to call in and ask us maybe more personal questions too, like just Q&A style. So that'll be fun. Saturday all day we will have, I think that's also starting at noon, which I will be one of the earlier ones since it'll be later in Finland, and we'll be taking your money if we're recovering from religion. So please keep that in mind this week. They do incredible work. If there is a cause that you're going to donate to this year, I believe that is one of the best places that you can put your money that's going to actively go to good use immediately. So, then that brings us to the Sunday show, which is going to be, am I looking at the right thing? Yes, the 11th. That's going to be with Matt Dillahunty and Paul Enns. And then the Sunday show After Dark, which will be with Forrest and Eric SS. Then Monday, Skep Talk with Forrest Valkai and John Gleason. And then Tuesday, it's Chewed Gum. And I'm so jealous because it's Arden and Alyssa. Can we do an episode with the three of us someday? Because that would be really fun.
Is it possible? Can we do that?
I would love that.
I don't know, but I think it would be great. But yeah,
that would be really fun.
Thanks for watching that clip. Hey, we're trying to do some data research about whether or not our callers successfully proved that God existed. If they didn't, don't forget to like and subscribe. That's how we know they failed. But if you don't like and subscribe, you're saying that they succeeded. So you're saying that by liking and subscribing, you will be affirming that you are an atheist. Hey, what else should they do?
I don't know. Maybe go to patreon.com/calltheline and donate some of their hard-earned money.
Like and subscribe.